All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to everyone joining us on the Zoom and the YouTube. Sponsorships for today. The Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves are Ushi and Mindy Schreiber and Schus Rafu Shlema for Eliyahu Rafael Ben Miriam, Mati and Chanalei Margalit in memory of Mati's father, Yosef Shlomo Moshe Shmuel Ben Yekutiel Yehuda. His yard site is on Chaf Dal and Teves. And the Daf Yomi sponsor for today, Brian and Karen Gold in memory of Morty Esterson, Zechron Lebracha, Bracha Strimwood, Zechron Lebracha, and Jenny Fogel, Zechron Lebracha. The Shema should have and the families in Nechama. Okay, we will begin on Daf Kuf Gimel 103, and right at the top, new Mishnah. Okay. Mishnah says, Kol shelo zacha mizbeach b'v'sara, lo zacha l'kohanim ba'ora. So any time where we're now transitioning to discuss the hides, the skins, the ore of the carbon. So the Mishnah tells us, any time that the mizbeach does not get or get the benefit of the basar, meaning there's some psul that happened before the zrika, and so the meat was not brought on the mizbeach. Then in those cases, the kohanim do not get to benefit from the hides. They don't get to keep the hides. Shne'emar, olas ish. The pasuk says, the whole pasuk says, "Va'kohen hamakriv es olas ish, ora olas sheikriv lakohen lo yes." That's the pasuk that teaches us that the kohen gets the ore of the carbon ola, and it says olas ish, which is ola also ish. It has to be an ola that had some type of benefit to a person, right? So if the basar became tameh and therefore was not brought on the mizbeach, and so there was no benefit to a person, so therefore the kohanim do not get the benefit from the hide. Okay, ola shnishchot shelo lishma. How about if we have an ola that was brought shelo lishma? So we know that an ola, we learned this all the way back, that an ola that was brought shelo lishma, while it is not afal pisha, I'm reading the Mishnah, afal pisha also lebailim, even though the owners do not get credit for their ola, it still is a valid carbon. They just still need to bring, the owners would still need to bring another ola, but it's still a valid carbon. And therefore, even though the bailim do not, it doesn't count towards the chov of the bailim, the kohanim, the kohanim still are zochav in the or because the carbon is still brought. It's still a valid carbon. It just didn't satisfy the obligation of the owner. Okay, Mishnah continues to tell us, echad olas ha'ish, echad olas ha'isha, or the kohen. Whether it's an ola of a man or a woman, the or goes to the kohen. We'll see exactly why in the Gemara. But again, bringing it down because the pasuk says olas ish. So we're saying ish is not, in this case, is not specific to only men, but it would include an ola brought by a woman. Those hides would also go to them. How about oros kachim, the bailam? But however, if we have a carbon that's a kachim kalim, those skins, along with the rest of the animal, go to the owners. They do not go to the kohanim. But oros kachim, the kohanim kal v'chomer. But the skins of other kachim, those would go to the kohanim. Why? Because the kal v'chomer. Umayim ola. The Mishnah started telling us about, and the pasuk talks about the hide of an ola that it goes to the kohanim. So umayim ola shelo zachul b'bsara zachul b'ora. So kohanim who do not get the benefit from the basar of the ola, because obviously the basar of the ola is burnt on the mizbeach. Even so, the pasuk says that the hide does go to the kohanim. So kachim shezahu b'bsara. So if you have a kachim where the kohanim do get to partake in the portions of the basar, eno din shezahu b'ora. So certainly in those cases, the kohanim should be able to keep and have the benefit of the or. And the Mishnah just throws in, which we'll discuss more in detail in the Gemara. Don't come and try to shlag out my kal v'chomer from the mizbeach, which is what, and Rashi tells us why. If you look in Rashi, it's right before the Gemara. It says, "Ein hazbeach mochiach klomar ve'en lecha lomar mizbeach yochiach shezocha bebasar ha'ola v'lo zacha bar." Don't say that we can disprove this logic because when it comes to an ola, the basar is gotten by the mizbeach, but the mizbeach does not get the or because the pasuk tells us it goes to the kohen. And there, let's say, so we should be able to use the same logic or to refute the logic why the Kohen would get the or of a kachim. Rather, right? You can't use this because the mizbeach never is zocha to the or, right? So you can't say they don't get it in this case, and therefore the Kohanim should also not get it. The mizbeach is never zocha to the or, and since it's never zocha to the or, we can't use the same logic. Right? So we can still use the kavachomer to teach us kachikachim, and again, we'll get it in a bit more detail in the Gemara. Okay, Gemara brings down Tana Rabbanan. Olas ish, prad olas hegdish. Now we're going to break down the pasuk. So again, the pasuk is discussing an ola, and the pasuk specifically says that the hide of the ola goes to the kohen. The pasuk says, "Kohen hamakriv es ola, Kohen hamakriv es olas ish, or haola sher hikriv la kohen lo yihya." Okay, so he's saying olas ish. The fact that it calls it an olas ish, prad olas hegdish. That is coming to exclude an ola that belongs to hegdish, and we're going to define what this is in a moment. Div Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So Rabbi Yehuda says olas ish is an exclusionary phrase to exclude olas hegdish. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Pral olas gerim. He says, no, it is. I agree. Olas ish is an exclusionary phrase, but it comes to exclude the ola of a ger. And again, we'll discuss what this means as well. Okay, now we're going to break down. We're going to discuss Rabbi Yehuda's shita. What does it mean by to be an olas hegdish? Why is that excluded? So my Pral olas hegdish. What does it mean to exclude olas hegdish? We're going to have three machlokas. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. Prat la'ola haba min hamosaros. So Rabbi Chia bar Yehuda says, Rabbi Chia bar Yosef says, this excludes an ola that comes from mosaros. What are mosaros? So let's look in Rashi, min hamosaros. It's the third Rashi in the Gemara. Min hamosaros. Dechol hashamas shel re'iyah kigon. Tmuras asham v'asham shmeisu ba'alav. Right, so you have any of these instances where someone brought an asham and they're getting atonement from somewhere else, and now we have this extra asham. What do? We leave it out to graze. It gets a mum. We sell it, and that money is mosaros. Those are the extra funds, right? So the kaimalon. What do? Yiru v'yimkaru v'yiblu d'meim l'nedava. And with that money, who olas ketzam mizbeach, we bring nedava offerings that we call ketzam mizbeach just to kind of keep the mizbeach going. Delav olas ishu, but those are not the ola of a specific person, right? Because that person had to bring another ola or got kapara from somewhere else, and therefore these are just if we hold that the mosaros, these extra olas that are brought, are considered a communal, right? That makes sense because then this is not an olas ish, and certainly the kohen would not be zocha to the hides. However, but there is an opinion that says that yes, these don't count towards that person's ola, but they're brought as an olas nedava by that individual. So now, if we're talking about a nidavas yachid, why shouldn't the kohen be zocha to the hides the same way it would on any ola that seems to still be an olas ish? Because it is still a personal korban. So Michael, remember what do you say? So Rava tells us why. Ha'ola. So Rava is talking about a case, is talking about the pasuk of the korban tamid shel shachar, and he says ha'ola, the ola rishona. It refers to the ola that has to be the first one, right? So the drasha is just ha'ola refers to the first one. Hachanami, we make a similar drasha. Ha'ola, our pasuk said, or ha'ola, the or of the ola rishona, it's only the first ola. And in our case, it doesn't mean the first one brought, it means the first one that was designated to be an ola for this person, and not these mosaros, which are sort of secondary. They're still brought as olos by the person, but they're not the ha'ola. They're not the originally designated ola, and therefore they're still considered, these mosaros would still not fit into olas ish. Okay, so that is the first answer. That's the first answer of what we mean by olas hegdish. Comes along Rav Aibo, Amar Rav Yanai. He says, no, prat lematvis ola lebedek habayis. Now, what does it mean, olas hegdish? It means if somebody donates an ola for bedek habayis, right? So we know we have two types of kedusha. We have kedusha saguf, where the animal itself is to be brought as a korban. That's kedusha saguf. There's intrinsic value in the animal. And then you could have, when you donate an animal or you donate something else to the Beis Hamikdash for bedek habayis, it's just for general Beis Hamikdash keep. And in that case, there's kedusha, but it's kedusha's damim, just the value of the animal that's kedusha, and not the animal, not the animal itself. So in this case, you have someone who has an ola, and then they donated that ola for bedek habayis, right? So now we sort of have competing. We have the intrinsic kedushas haguf of the animal as an ola, but then we also have kedushas hadamim because it was donated for bedek habayis. So Gemara continues. So Lomi by Lamanda Amar Kache Bedek Habayis Tafsi Mid Oraisa. So according to the Manda Amar, that even in this case, that the kedusha of the bedek habayis, the secondary kedusha, is tofes on the animal, even though it already has kedusha saguf, and that is tofes doraisa. So now we have multiple kedushas on the animal. So according to them, I understand that certainly it is now bedek habayis ola, and because it's bedek habayis ola, it is not personal ola. It's not olas ish, so therefore it is excluded. So I understand according to that Manda Amar. However, El afilu l'manda amar lo tafsi. But even according to the Manda Amar that says that in this case, because the animal already had kedushas haguf, the kedushas damim is not tofes mida oraisa when it's given to the bedek habayis. Hani mile basar. Well, that opinion is only talking about the meat. Why? Because the meat itself is going to be brought on the mizbeach, and therefore that we can say that has kedushas haguf. And the kedushas damim cannot take effect because the basar is meant for the mizbeach. However, aval or tafis, but even that opinion will say that the hides that are not brought on the mizbeach, the kedushas bedek habayis is tofes, and by virtue of the fact that the kedushas bedek habayis is tofes on the or, it is no longer considered olas ish, right? At least from the perspective of the or, it is not an olas ish, and therefore does not go to the kohanim. Right? So that's the second answer, right? So the first answer we had was that it's an ola that comes from these mosaros, the extra money that's found because a asham was sent to graze, the money was brought in and used to purchase olas. And the second answer was that it is coming to exclude a case where you take an ola and you designate it for bedek habayis, and therefore it's no longer considered olas ish, it's considered olas hagdesh. So those are our first two answers. Okay, slight digression, then we'll go to our third answer. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avuha. Oh, sorry. V'cheinam. V'cheinam Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Avuha, Amar Rabba bar Avuha, Prad la'ola haba min hamasaras. So Rav Nachman, the name of Rabba bar Avuha, comes along and agrees with our first answer that olas ish comes to exclude an ola that comes from the mosaras. That is what's considered olas hegdesh. So Amar Rav Nuna, Rav Nachman. Come on. So he says, who are you holding by? Why do you hold this opinion? Rabbi Yehuda. It must be that you hold by Rabbi Yehuda, who we're going to get to in a minute. But Rabbi Yehuda already retracted his shita. Titania, what's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? Titania, Shisha linadava, the ola haba min hamosaros. So there are 13 boxes, 13 shofaros, actually we call them, that were in that were the base of Mikdash, and 6 of them had held coins for these mosaros, right? The mosaros coins were all, apparently, I guess it was common that it happened, and 6 of these shofaros held coins out of the mosaros, and that's what you would bring these olas, right? They would bring the ola habam and mosaros, shelo yikahan zakan ba'ora, and the kohanim would not be zocha to their or, like we said, like our first answer, right? Did Rabbi Yehuda, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Amr Rabbi Nechemia Amri la Rabbi Shimon he asked Rabbi Yehuda, Imkain, if so, you're going to say that these olos that come from the mosaros, the hides do not go to the kohanim. Imkain bitalta b'drasha shel Yehoyada HaKohen. Then you are going to be nullifying the drasha that was made by Yehoyada HaKohen, which is Ditanya, or I think some say Ditnan. Zeh midrash darash of Yehoyada HaKohen. Asham hu ashom asham lahashem. So one pasuk seems to imply that the asham is lahashem. And then Rashi only brings us part of the pasuk, but there's another pasuk that says kachatas ka'asham, kachatas ka'asham torachas lahem, and I forget the exact wording of the pasuk, but it says that the kohanim are zochet to the chatas and the asham. You see 2 competing psukim. In one pasuk, it seems that the asham is lahashem. Another pasuk says the asham is for the kohanim. So we have a steered answer. Right, kol sheba mishum chatas mishum asham yilkach bo olos what do we do? We're talking about where we have these mosaros, and they come from the chatas and asham. So what do? You let them get a mum, you sell them, and what happens to these coins? You buy yilkach ba'olos, you purchase olos, habasar l'Hashem, the meat goes on the mizbeach for Hashem, and orel kohen, and the skins go to the kohanim. So we see clearly here that the drasha of Yehoyada is that when we have these olos brought from mosaros, the kohanim do in fact get to keep the or. So this would be a neged our first answer, and neged Rav Nachman in the name of Rabbi Baravua, who agreed that was the exclusion that was meant in the pasuk. So Amarle, Ella Mar b'may mukim. Okay, so he says, okay, I'm a kabel. So now, what do you exclude from olas ish? So when we say olas ish, prad olas hegdesh, what does it come to exclude? If it doesn't come to exclude the mosaros because of the drasha of Yoyada Kohen. So Amarle, this is our third answer. This is the case where someone is makdish all of his possessions, and according to the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, which is Titnan. Let's say someone is makdish all of their possessions, and within their possessions, they have certain animals that are ready to be brought as a korban. So what do? Rabbi Lazar Omer, Zecharim, Yimachru Tzarche Olos. You take the male animals and you sell them to people who need to bring in ola. Nekevos, Yimachru Tzarche Zivche Shlamim. You take the female animals and you sell them to people who need to go bring a shlamim. Okay, so now the animals get used for karbanos. Udemehem. What about the money that you just received in that purchase? Yiplu Imshar Nechaseha LeBedek Habayis. That money gets given to the Beis Mikdash just for Bedek Habayis purposes. Okay, that's the first opinion. Now we're going to this is the opinion we're focusing on. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Zecharim Atzma Migur Olos. No, don't sell the Zecharim. All of the male animals actually get brought as karbanos ola. The nekevos. What about nekevos? That cannot be brought as an ola. Yimkeru letzarche shlamim. So you sell those to people who need to bring a karban shlamim. And what do you do with the money? In this case, v'yavi b'demeim olos. And now you buy olos with that money. Right? V'shar nechasim yiplu lebedek habayis. And then all the other possessions you have, those go to Bedek Habayis. V'afilu Rabbi Yeshua, even according to this opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, the Amar Adam Cholek Ekdesho, even according to Rabbi Yeshua, who we see that when someone says I'm makdish all my nechasim to the Bedek Habayis, we can split what that designation is. It doesn't all have to be just the value, but we see Rabbi Yeshua holds the animals that are right for a karban are brought as a karban, and the animals that are the other possessions are sold and given for Bedek Habayis. So we see that in his designation, we have some that are given to Hashem, some that are brought to the Mizbech, and some that are given to the Bedek Habayis. Right? So Hani Mile Basar, but this is only the meat, right? Only the meat is what's brought on the Mizbeach, or toughest. But the hides that are left over that can't be brought on the Mizbeach, I might have thought they go to the Kohanim. No, those the Kedushas Bedek Habayis is tofes them, and therefore that is what's considered Olas Hegdesh, right? Olas Hegdesh, that the animal itself is brought on the Mizbeach, and the hides, which would ordinarily go to the Kohen, are instead have Kedushas Bedek Habayis and are not Olas Ish. So that's our third answer. So we have three answers. Just to quickly review, right? Three answers. We brought in the pasuk itself said Olas Ish, and Rabbi Huda's shita was Olas Ish comes to exclude something that's called Olas Hegdesh. Three opinions what it means to be Olas Hegdesh. Either it is an Ola that is brought from these mosaros, the extra funds from Asham, Chatz and Asham that had to graze and get a mum. So those are considered property of the Mizbech and not Olas Ish. So those hides do not go to the Kohanim. Or we say it's a case where someone takes their Ola offering and they're matfis that Ola for Bedek Habayis. So again, they were tofes that hide with Kedushas Bedek Habayis, and therefore it is Olas Hegdesh and not Olas Ish, does not go to the Kohanim. And the final answer that we had was somebody who is makdish all of their nechasim, and within their possessions they had animals that are ready to be brought as an ola, or other animals that are sold to people who need a shlamim, and then with that money they're brought. An ola is brought, and in those cases, those are olas hegdesh, because the hides do not go to the kohanim and instead go to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. Now we look at but now we go back. We had a second opinion of what Olas Ish came to exclude. That was the opinion of Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, Omer, Prada Olas Gerims. He told us Olas Ish comes to exclude Olas Ger. So the Gemara asks, Atu Amar Simai Barchli Kaila Ravina. Atu Ger Lab Ish. Why would Olas Ish exclude a Ger? Why is a Ger not an Ish? An Olas Ger should be included. A Ger is an Ish like any other Ish. So Amarle, no, Prat Ger Shemes Ein Yarshim. No, it's a specific case. It's a case where we have a Ger who dies and does not have any Yarshim. And we know a Ger Shinizgayer Kikatan Hanoladami, when a Ger converts, it is as if even his biological relatives, even if they convert with him, it's as if there is no relationship, no connection, correct? And therefore, if a Ger has an Ola and then he dies, there is nobody else, and he hasn't gotten remarried and it doesn't have any other Yarshim. So now we have an Ola that doesn't have Bailam. So it's no longer an Olas Ish because it has no owners. So it's still brought, but it's brought and the hides stay with the Beis HaMikdash, not given to the Kohanim because this is not considered an Olas Ish. Okay, spend a little less time. Gemara gives a little less thought to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, right? It's more clear. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. Now we're going to go in a bit more detail breaking down this pasuk. We'll read the pasuk one more time. We read it a couple times, but we'll read it one more time because we're now going to darshan different parts of the pasuk. The pasuk says, "Va'kohen hamakriv es olas ish or ha'ola asher hikriv la'kohen lo yiyah." Right, the kohen who brings the ola of an ish, the skins of that ola which he has brought go to the kohen. Right, asher hikriv la'kohen lo yiyah. They belong to that kohen. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. Olas Ish. The pasuk says, Olas Ish, Ainli Ella Olas Ish. We only know if it's an Ola brought by a man. Olas, and we take out the Gersa of Gerim. Olas Nashim V'Avadim, because we just discussed Gerim a second ago. Olas Nashim V'Avadim Minayin. How do we know that if a woman or an Ebed brings an Ola, that hide goes to the Kohen? Talmud Lomar, or Ha'ola. Riba. So ha'ola is actually extra. We didn't really need the word ha'ola to be repeated. It could have just said olas ish or asher ikriv lakohen. Yeah, why or ha'ola? Ha'ola is riboy, and it comes to include the ola of nashim and avadim as well. So imkain matam and lomer olas ish. Why does it say olas ish? Then what does ish come to teach us? Ola she'alsa ish. It's only an ola that actually benefited a person. Let's say you have a Kohen that either shechted outside of its time or outside of the proper place, and in which case it's possible, and the Bailim do not get any benefit from that Ola, right? They're not there. That doesn't satisfy their obligation. So in that case, the Kohanim do not get to take the hide, right? If the rest of the Kohen was not accepted, the Kohanim do not get to take the hide in that case. Okay, so okay, I might have thought, neged our Mishnah, that maybe I would then also include in this case, really also exclude, if a Korban Ola was brought Shelo Lishma, right? Below also Bailam, and therefore we know even though the carbon is brought, it does not count towards, it doesn't satisfy the owner's obligation. Amid Beis. I would have thought that in this case as well, this is not considered Olas Ish, and therefore the Kohanim do not get the hide. Tamid Lomar, or Ha'ola Mikol Makom. No, it says or Ha'ola is exclusionary, is including any type of carbon that is brought. So the difference being when it's brought, not L'Shem Bailim, the Ola is still valid, it just doesn't count towards the obligation of the Bailim. Versus when it's Chutz L'Makom or Chutz L'Zmano, where the offer is invalid, where the offer or the Ola is invalid in and of itself. And therefore, in that case, only in the latter case do the Kohanim not benefit from the or. Now, so the drasha continues, and now we're going to get into how we extend, which we touched on in the Mishnah, but we're going to get to it now in more detail, how we extend from the or of an Ola, which we said goes to the Kohen, and now the or of other Kachim. Okay, so Pasuk says, or Ha'ola, Ainli Ella, or Ha'ola. Okay, I only know from this Pasuk that it's the or of the Ola that goes to the Kohanim. How about Oros Kachim Minayin? How do we know that the or of other Kachim also go to the Kohanim? Tabed Lomar, we skip the next two words, Asher Hikriv that which is brought. And Rashi says, "Kol karbanos b'mashma," meaning any carbon that's any carbon that's brought, right? Other kachim. Yachol shani mar ba'af kachim kalim. Okay, I might have thought now let's bring in all karbanos and the Kohanim will get the or from all Kohanim, even kachim, which the Mishnah told us is not true. Tamalomar. Ola, it has to be something similar to an ola. Ma'ola kachim, avkol kachim. So it has to be some comparison to an ola, which is kachim, and therefore we learn from here that we learn based on this pasuk. The Talmud Kama holds that the Kohen is zocha to the or in all cases of kachim. Okay, so that's our first answer. Our first answer, Tanakama says it is learned out from the book, from the Pesukim. Specifically, Asher Hikriv. Okay. Rabbi Shmuel comes and gives a different answer. Or ha'ola, the pasuk right starts the same way. Or the pasuk only tells us or ha'ola, ainli ela ha'ola, oros kachim minayin. How do we know other kachim, the Kohanim benefit from the or as well? V'dinu, it's a kal v'chomer, and this also was touched upon in our Mishnah. Uma'ola shelo zachu b'bsara zachu b'ora. We have a carbon ola where the Kohanim are not zocha to the basar because the basar obviously is burned on the mizbeach. Yet the pasuk tells us that they do get the or. So kachim shezachu b'bsaran, enodin shezachu b'oran. But if we have kachim where the Kohanim do get to partake in the basar, certainly then they should partake in the or, which they did by an ola. So we're going to ask mizbeach, but and this was the refutation that we noted in the Mishnah. The mizbeach could disprove this. Shezacha bebasar, velo zacha ba'or. The mizbeach, when it comes to a carbon ola, is zocha to the basar of the ola, but it is not zocha to the or of the ola, because we just said the pasuk tells us the or goes to the Kohanim. So we say no, that's not a good refutation, because mal mizbeach sheken lo zacha b'miktas. Mizbeach is never zocha to the or. It doesn't ever have like the parsha of or by the mizbeach. So therefore, we can't shlug up the kal v'chomer from that. So we can't apply that to Kohanim who do have in other places, namely by an ola, that they are zocha in the hides. And therefore, once we know that we have this idea that the or goes to the Kohanim by carbon ola, we can make this kal v'chomer that it works on all other kachim. Okay, second answer, right? So Tanakama learned it from a pasuk, Asher Hikriv. Rabbi Shmuel learns it from a kal v'chomer. And now we have a third opinion, Rabbi Omer. So Rabbi says, we didn't really need this pasuk at all, right? We don't need this pasuk at all to teach us kachim. We're totally leaving the pasuk unlike the first two opinions, right? We only needed that pasuk to teach us that the or of an ola goes to the Kohanim. Why? In all places, we know that the or always follows the basar, right? Outside of an ola, which we'll get to. Right, param hanisrafim, siram hanisrafim, hein v'oroseihem nisrafim imahim. So right, if it's all burned up, then the or gets burnt up with it. Chatas v'asham, when you have chatas v'asham v'zivchei shal metzibor, matana l'kohen, it's a gift to the kohen, right? It follows the basar. Ratzu mafshit, son. If the kohen wants, he can flay the animal and take the or separately. Lo ratzu, if he doesn't want to, ochlen osan al gabi or, and he can just eat the meat and leave the or behind. But either way, we see the or follows the basar. What about kachim kalim? The Bailav, they all go to the owners. Ratzu mafshita no son. If they want, they can flay it and take the or for themselves. Ratzu ochel no son al gabi or, the same way, or they can just leave the or and eat the meat. But we see Rabbi is telling us in all cases it's clear that the or always follows the basar. Aval ola, however, ola we have a problem. Pasuk tells us if shidesa ola v'nitacho salon sacheha, that you have to flay the skin off of the ola and cut it up into pieces. So now that the pasuk tells us that it has to be separated from the basar, I might have thought that the Kohanim are not zocha in the or because there's something different here. It's something different going on, unlike the other karbanos, where the or was always connected and stayed with the basar. Here, the Torah tells us it must be flayed and separated. So Talmud Lomar, that's why we have a pasuk or ha'ola asher hikriv. That's why we have the pasuk of or ha'ola that teaches us that the or, in the case of an ola, goes to the Kohanim. But anyway, we see from the opinion of Rebbe that how does Rebbe understand that kachim the or goes to the Kohanim. He says that's just standard. It's standard in any case. In all cases of karbanos, wherever the basar goes, the or will follow, and therefore we don't need we don't need a pasuk like Tanakama, and we don't need a kal v'chomer like Rabbi Shmuel. It's just standard logic is that it follows the basar, and in fact, the pasuk was only needed to teach us the non-standard case of ola that the hide still goes to the kohanim. Okay. We continue darshaning. Lo yihya, right? Remember, let's just quickly read the pasuk. The pasuk is that kohen hamakriv as olas ish ora ola sherikriv la kohen lo yihya. Right? It goes specifically to that kohen. Lo yihya, and this is a drasha we had yesterday. Similar drasha we had yesterday. Lo yihya prat l'tful yom ve'onen. Those lo yihya only to that kohen. It comes to exclude a tful yom or an onen. Why? Sheyachol. I might have thought lo yisku b'basar. Right, we always said yesterday or the day before that it's full yom and onain. They do not get to eat from the basar. Why? Because they do not get to be cholik in the basar. Why? Because they cannot eat it. Right? They have a problem of achila. However, maybe I would have thought that they do get to be cholik in the or because or doesn't have a din of achila. So the fact that you have a full yom or an onain, maybe that doesn't matter because they should still be able to. Right? They shouldn't. Maybe they're not excluded from the or. Tamalomar lo yihya. So that's what the pasuk tells us. Lo yihya only to the kohen. Problem mechusar kippurim v'tipul yom of onen. So you come to exclude mechusar kippurim, tipul yom and onen. They do not get to partake in the or. Okay, and now we're going to break down. Remember, 3 shitas. Tanakama learned from a drasha in the pasuk Asher Hikriv. The Rabbi Shmuel learned from a kal v'chomer that the from Ola, right? Kal v'chomer from Ola, and Rebbe learned just generally the basar, the or always follows the basar. Okay, so now we're going to say why doesn't each one hold by, or not all of them, but why some don't hold by the other? The Tanakama nami tepilei midino. Why did the Tanakama have this drasha? Why didn't he also use the kal v'chomer? So we say, which is the answer we hear all the time. Milsa da'asi b'kal v'chomer tarav v'kasav l'kra. Right, even though you're right, the Tanakama could have held by the kal v'chomer, but he wanted to actually hang it on a pasuk, so he wanted the drasha from the pasuk itself. Okay, Rabbi Shmuel, hi Asher Hikriv, my avilei. Okay, and Rabbi Shmuel, who doesn't use the pasuk of Asher Hikriv that the Tanakama did, what does he do with that phrase Asher Hikriv? Prat l'tful yom chusar kippurim v'onen. He comes to do the din we just said of Rabbi to exclude a tful yom chusar kippurim and an onen. V'tepikle mi lo yihya. Why doesn't he learn it from lo yihya like Rabbi did? So Rabbi Shmuel has his reason, but Rabbi Shmuel uses this phrase for something else. Right? Rabbi Yochanan, Bishur Rabbi Shmuel. Nemar ba'ola in our pasuk lo yihya v'nemar ba'asham lo yihya. Malahalan atzmosav mutarin. Just like the by and asham the bones are mutar. Afkan most mutar. Just here by an ola the bones are mutar as well. So we learned that from Xeris Shava. Sorry, lo yihya. And we have to say mufni. It has to be an open, right? Because otherwise we could have said that's fine. You can make the drasha on lo yihya and still use it for Xeris Shava. It just wouldn't be Xeris Shava that's mufna. It wouldn't be that's open, right? We know if you have Xeris Shava that is mufna, even if we have a pircha to that Xeris Shava, it stands. But if you have a Xeris Shava that is not mufna, those words are used for something else, then if we have logic that counteracts the Xeris Shava, we knock up the Xeris Shava. And in this case, Rishmael needs to have it mufni. Why? De'ilo mufni. If we use that lo yiyah for this other drasha, and therefore it is not mufna, ikal mifrach, mal asham shekim besara mutar, lo yiyah, why? Because we could have excluded that saying the asham, because there is an element of basar which there isn't by an ola, and therefore we would be able to shlug up the Xeris Shava. So we have to make sure it's a mufna, and we can keep the Xeris Shava. What time is it? No, still have time. Okay, should we go a little bit ahead. All right, we'll go a little bit ahead. We'll go a little bit ahead. Rabbi Rafter might come back tomorrow, but we have a few minutes, so we'll take the first piece of the Mishnah. Okay, new Mishnah. Okay, kol hakadashim shir behem psul kodem lev sheitan. So now remember, we'll get to it in the Gemara. We're going to quote our Mishnah, but This mission is telling us that any time we have a psul in the kachim that happened before the hide was separated, ein or sein l'kohanim. Then the or does not go to the kohen; rather, it stays with the basar, which had a psul. However, if the or was already separated from the basar, and then there's a psul in the korban, or sein l'kohanim, the kohanim still get to keep that or. So we see here the deciding, the moment in time. That the deciding factor is whether the or was separated or not, right? So it's the time of hefshik, the time that the or was separated. If the psul happened before separation, the kohanim do not get the or. But if the psul happened after the or had already been separated, the kohanim are zocha to it. Okay. Amar Avchinina skana kohanim miyama l'reisi or shiozer beis hasreifa. He says, he gives his experience is that I had never seen a skin that was brought out to the Beis HaSreifa, and I believe it's Rashi who adds in, he's talking about a skin that was already filleted, right? Because obviously there are many times where a whole korban could have been brought out to the Beis HaSreifa, but this is talking about, he's saying where a skin was separated and then brought out to Beis HaSreifa. Rabbi Akiva, midvarav lamadnu, we can learn from the words of Rabbi Chanina skana kohanim, shamavshit es habachor v'nimtza treifa, shiusa kohanim ba'oro. We see from here that if you're mafshid the bechor and then it's found to be the treifa, so then you see that there's a psul afterwards that the kohanim still get to keep the or. Chachamim say no, ein lo re'inu raya. Just the fact that Rabbi Chanina skana kohanim said he hasn't seen it, that's not a raya. Just maybe he hadn't experienced it. Elo yasal beis treifa. In this case, a treifa, which obviously was a psul that happened before, right? We didn't know about it, but the treifa psul obviously happened before the skinning of the hide. And therefore, the hide would go to the Beis HaSreifa, according to Chachamim. Okay. So again, we'll just do the first little piece here. The Gemara says, Kol shelo zacha mizbeach b'basara, quoting our Mishnah from the beginning of today, that said, Kol shelo zacha mizbeach b'basara, anytime that the mizbeach is not zocha to the basar, lo zacha kohanim ba'or, the kohanim do not get the or. V'afagav ta'avshite the or, kodem zrika, it seems to imply even if the hide was separated first, right? And this, in our Mishnah, the moment that we really care about is whether the basar went onto the mizbeach. If the basar goes onto the mizbeach, you get the or. If it didn't, the kohanim do not get the or. But whether or not it was flayed before the psul is irrelevant. So money, who's the opinion? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. This must be the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. To Amar. And we're going to just gloss over this machlokas because it's going to be it's going to be brought up in detail tomorrow. But Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says, "Ein hadam meratza ala or b'fnei atzmo." Rabbi Elazar says that the zrikas hadam can only be meratza when the or is connected to the basar, but not when they're separate. That they go together. Only when they're together. Fine, but Ema Seifa, what about this mission we just brought down, which is actually one mission? We just broke it up in our Gemara. Ema Seifa, which says, which again, now the exact point that we're worried about is whether the psul came before or after the hide was skinned. Now, Asan Rebbe. This goes now according to the opinion of Rebbe. The Amar, Rebbe says that you can have this rika that is matir the hide even when it is not connected to the basar, right? So if you skinned it first, and then there's something happened, the psul happened to the basar, so you can't. So there's no basar for the zrika to be matir, but the zrika can be matir for the or by itself. That's the opinion of Rebbe, right? So now Reish Rabbi Elazar say for Rav. Well, we have two different authors of our Mishnah, which obviously we do not like. So Amar Abaye says, "Be the sefer Rabbi he Reish Nami Rabbi." So Abaye says, "No, we're going to make both of them Rabbi." Umoda Rebbe she'ein afshei kodem zrika, and we said, right, we had a problem with the Reisha, our Mishnah from the beginning of the day, that we said it can't be like Rebbe. He says no, Rebbe, while he agrees to that principle, Rebbe says that just never happens. Right? The general rule is you are not mafshit before zrika. You first do the zrika and then you flay the animal. So Rebbe's saying that's just not how it happens, and therefore that's why if it happens to be that way, like it is in the Seifa, that's the case. But in the Reisha, he was just dealing with the regular case where we do not flay the animal prior to zrika. Okay, but Rava says also he answers the contradiction, but he answers it the other way. He says midoresh Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Since we said the beginning of the Mishnah is according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, Seifa nami Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, Okay, therefore, then we have to answer the seifa of the brisa, which said kodem hafshet, which seems to imply that the animal could be skinned and still have the zrikas hadam, be meratzeh for the or by itself, which is negative the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Say no. What does he mean? What does it mean when we say before and after hafshet? Kodem sheniru lehafshet, achar sheniru lehafshet. It just means when it is right to do the hafshata and when it is right and when it is not right to do the hafshata, which means before or after zrika. It's really talking about the exact same point. He's just saying it's not that it flayed beforehand. It's saying when it is finally right to be flayed, which is only after the zrika. And we'll go very quickly. We have 2 minutes. We'll go to the Rambam on the first mission we did. Rambam in Hilchos Ma'aser Karbanos Perek Hey Halacha Yutet. Rambam says, Kol oros kachi. Right. So now we're talking about where do the oros of the various kohanim go? Sorry. Let's try that again. Where do the oros of the various karbanos go? Do they go to the kohanim? Do they go to the bailim? Or do they not go anywhere? Kol oros kachim la kohanim. So any or that is from a kachik kachim, that goes to the kohanim. Bein bekabanos sibor, bein bekabanos yachid. Any whether it's kabanos sibor or yachid, shenamar or haola asher hikriv. Right, and it seems from here that the Rambam is learned from asher hikriv, which was the opinion of the Tanna Kama. Okay, aval. Oros kachim kalim lebalim, but if it's kachim kalim, that follows the basar, goes with the bailim. This was our beginning of our Mishnah. Any ola that the mizbech is not zocha to the basar, lo zocha kana ba'ora shenamar olas ish olash also ish. Right, so that's the same drasha that we made. And then in halacha chaf aleph, we quote two of ours. Right, remember we had 3 opinions as to what it means to be Olas Hegdesh, which the skins do not go to the Kohanim. And the Rambam quotes 2 out of those 3 opinions, which is Hamatfis Olas Bedek Habayis. If you have an Ola and you're matfis it to Bedek Habayis, or Makdish Nechasav, Vayu Ben Zecharim, or you have your Makdish all of your Nechasim and you happen to have male animals that are Ra'i to the Mizbeach, Sheyikrivu Olos, in all those cases, Ein Orosem Kohanim, Shenamar, Olos Ish, Prat, Olas Hegdesh. In that case, you don't do it. And so we see the Rambam seems to hold like both of those shitas that those are considered Olas Hegdesh, but does not hold by the third shita, which was because the third shita was disputed right by the drasha of Yoyada HaKohen. And therefore, the Rambam does not quote that shita. Only 2 opinions within what is Olas Hegdesh, where the hides do not go to the Kohen. All right, shkayach.